This is the complete biography of Buddha, the fully awakened one, who gave doctrine for human liberation and established Buddhism, the fourth largest religion in the world. India in the 7th century BC was in intense ferment and going through a transformation that was never seen before in the history of the world. For Aryans, life has never been as good as it was now. The Indo-Gangetic plains were very fertile, providing them more than enough for their needs. This surplus economy led to the rapid development of the Indian economy, and new and larger towns and cities started mushrooming all over the subcontinent. The rapid spread of urbanization brought new challenges. The trade-based urban society needed new answers to the evolving questions. Buddha's answers to these questions, emerging during the 7th century BC, are still providing the path to humankind today. This is the story of Prince Siddhartha of the ancient Sakyan kingdom of Kapilvastu, who gained supreme enlightenment and became Buddha. Queen Mahamaya was sleeping in her royal palace. Her husband, Suddhodana, was the king of the kingdom of Kapilvastu of Sakyan clan. She was dreaming in her sleep. She saw a six-tusked white elephant descending from heaven, which revolved around her 3 times, and then it entered inside her womb. In her dreams, she saw herself moving up in the space and ascending a great rocky mountain. She woke up and told the king about her dreams. The next day, King Suddhodana summoned the astrologers in his palace and asked the meaning of these dreams of the queen. Based on these dreams, the astrologers predicted that she will give birth to a son with 32 signs of a great man. If he chooses to stay at home, he will become a universal monarch. But if he leaves the house and renounces the world, he will become an arhat, an enlightened Buddha. Time passed quickly. When Mahamaya felt that the time has come for the birth of the child, she decided to visit her maternal home as per the ancient Kolian tradition. Queen Mahamaya was a princess of the neighboring Kolian kingdom of Devdaha. While traveling to Devdaha along with her attendants, she stopped in the beautiful Lumbini Gardens to take some rest. Lumbini Gardens were situated somewhere in the middle of the kingdoms of Kapilvastu and Devdaha. After taking bath in the nearby pond, she felt the pain and gave birth to Buddha in the standing position while holding the branches of a sal tree under the full bloom. The ancient scriptures mention that Buddha was received by none other than the Saka, the king of gods himself. Queen Mahamaya and the newborn prince returned to Kapilvastu, where they were received with great festivity. On the 5th day after the birth, the naming ceremony was held, and the child was named Siddhartha, which means fulfillment of every wish. But Queen Mahamaya died 7 days after the birth of Siddhartha. The young prince was brought up by his stepmother, Mahaprajapati. Asita, the great sage of the time, heard about the birth of the prince. He wanted to see the child and visited the royal palace. King Suddhodana became very excited with the unexpected visit of the great sage. He brought the young prince to the sage so that the child could be blessed by the sage. But to the surprise of all, the legs of the child moved and rested on the matted locks of the sage. The ascetic rose from his seat and saluted the child with his folded hands. He saw the child with a smile and then started crying with continuous tears. The king became very concerned about the future of the child and asked about his reaction. The great sage said that he smiled because the young prince will attain enlightenment and will become Buddha. He cried because he won't be able to hear the supreme truth from the Buddha and will not be able to benefit from the ultimate wisdom of Buddha, as he would die long before he attains Buddhahood. Siddhartha was a quiet child and was compassionate who loved nature. His education started at the age of 8 and he quickly mastered all the teachings of his teachers. He received special training in the art of warfare. He also learned literature, arts, and religion. He mastered several languages. A remarkable spiritual incident took place during the 9th year of Prince Siddhartha. He accompanied his father to the annual plowing festival, which was participated by the king, nobles, and commons to mark the beginning of the sowing season. The festival began with the chanting of Vedic mantras. As the process of plowing started, the worms and insects started getting killed in large numbers. Siddhartha was shocked to see the dying insects. It was too hot, and the prince started sweating continuously. He left the function and sat under the shade of a rose apple tree. He sat cross-legged and reflected on whatever he had just seen. He entered the state of deep meditation, and before long, he experienced the state of mind better known as the state of Samadhi. King Suddhodana reached the site looking for his son. He saw Prince Siddhartha in a deep state of meditation and immediately got worried about the prophecies of Prince turning into an ascetic. When Prince Siddhartha was 16 years old, he got married to his beautiful cousin, Princess Yashodhara. She was the daughter of the Kolian king Dandapani and was born on the same day as that of Buddha. King Dandapani had held an archery competition to select the husband of his daughter, and several princes from all across India participated in that competition. Siddhartha won the competition and the hand of the princess and returned to his capital city with his bride. King Suddhodana was very happy to see his son was married and was leading a family life. He wanted to ensure that his son remained busy with the pleasures of life. He built 3 magnificent palaces for his son, one for winters, one for the rainy season, and one for the summers. 3 lotus ponds were constructed for him. One pond was for blue lotus, another for red, and white in the third one. He led an excessively luxurious married life for the next 13 years. King Suddhodana wanted the Prince Siddhartha to become a great ruler and universal monarch, and he made sure that Siddhartha has every kind of luxury one can think of to shield the young prince from the discovery of sorrow from a young age. He tried everything to shield Siddhartha from the discovery of sorrows in the world and the realities of life. He tried everything to tie Siddhartha with all kinds of sensual pleasures of the physical world. The suttas disclose that even this shielded existence did not prevent Siddhartha from the discovery of sorrow, and he became aware of the realities of life through the 4 divine messengers. The first interface of Buddha with the reality of life was his interface with old age. One day Siddhartha went out riding with his charioteer Chandaka. He left his palace while touring the royal gardens in the city of Kapilvastu. He saw a very old man with a bent and a very weak body. He has never seen an old person and inquired to Chandaka, "What has happened to this man?" Chandaka replied that the man has grown old and this is the destiny of everyone who is born. Siddhartha returned to his palace deep in contemplation of his discovery of sorrow. Sometime after the first event, Siddhartha went riding with Chandaka southwards out of Kapilvastu. He had the second revelation in his discovery of sorrow. He saw a sick man in extreme pain. Siddhartha asked Chandika, "What has happened to him?" Chandika replied, "He is terminally ill and nothing would help him." Siddhartha returned to his palace in deep contemplation about his new experience. When the next time Siddhartha went out of the city, he saw a dead body being taken for cremation. The friends and relatives of the dead person were crying and carrying him for funeral. Siddhartha asked, "Why are they crying?" Chandika replied, "Because the person is dead, and this is the destiny of all." Siddhartha was very troubled at the sight of old age, sickness, and death. He returned to his palace in deep meditation about the way out for these three sorrows. Shortly after the third incident, Siddhartha went riding northwards of the city. He saw an ascetic who was dressed in saffron robes and carrying a ball in his hand. He looked very calm and peaceful. Siddhartha asked Chandika who that person was and why he looked in such peace. Chandika replied that the person was an ascetic who has renounced the world and all his earthly possessions. Siddhartha contemplated that all the material possessions are transitory, and old age, sickness, and death is the destiny of all. He decided to renounce the world and find a way to end the sorrow of old age, sickness, and death. It was full moon night in the kingdom of Kapilvastu, and Princess Yashodhara awoke from her dreams in the silence of the night. She was about to experience an event that changed the course of mankind. She was about to experience the great renunciation of Buddha. She had seen in her dreams that her husband, Siddhartha, was leaving her and their newborn son to seek the ultimate truth. She told Siddhartha, her husband, and the crown prince of the kingdom of Kapilvastu, about her dream and requested him not to leave her alone. Siddhartha thought he was seeking the path of truth, so he assured her that she will not be left alone. That promise was fulfilled several years after the renunciation of Buddha, when she joined the order of nuns in the Sangha. Meanwhile, Siddhartha stayed awoke, contemplating the four fleeting signs of old age, sickness, death, and peace in nirvana he had experienced a few days back. He asked his charioteer, Chandika, to saddle his horse. The night has finally arrived for the great renunciation of Buddha. King Suddhodana of Kapilvastu was very worried father at that time, because he had come to know about the inclination of Siddhartha to seek the path of renunciation and nirvana. He always remembered the words of astrologers that if Siddhartha chooses to stay at home, he will become a universal monarch. But if he leaves the house and renounces the world, he will become an arhat, an enlightened Buddha. King Suddhodana, in his last effort to prevent his 29-year-old son from leaving the palace, had set guards around the gates of the city and had stationed troops outside the city. This was the last effort from the king to prevent the renunciation of Buddha. His brothers guarded the different gates of the city. The northern gate was guarded by Amritodana, the southern gate by Dronodana, the western gate was guarded by Suklodana, and the eastern gate by King Suddhodana himself. The center of the palace was guarded by Mahanama, with a small contingent of troops. Siddhartha patted his horse Kantika gently and left his palace with Chandika. The full moon was shining bright in the night sky, clear of any clouds. When he reached the center of the city, he found Mahanama with his troop. Mahanama pleaded with Siddhartha not to renounce the world and cried. He begged and told about all the pains that his loved ones will have to go through once Siddhartha renounced this material world. Saka, the king of gods, was helping Siddhartha in the great renunciation and had put all guards on sleep through his spell. Siddhartha reached the eastern gate of Kapilvastu, and the god who resided there opened the gate for him. The moment he crossed the eastern gate, Mara appeared, and standing in the air, requested Siddhartha not to renounce the material world, and told him that seventh day of that day, Siddhartha would become the universal monarch. Siddhartha refused and continued his journey. Suddenly he had a desire to have another look at the city. With his desire, the earth turned around so that Siddhartha would not have to turn back. This was an important event during the process of the great renunciation of Buddha. At that place, a stupa was erected to mark that event, which was called Kanthaka Nivattana Stupa. He traveled through the night, and after crossing the river Anoma, he stopped. The river Anoma bordered three cities of Kapilvastu, Savatthi, and Vaishali. He gave his ornaments to Chandaka and asked him to return to Kapilvastu with Kanthaka, his horse. Chandaka cried and pleaded to remain with him, but Siddhartha asked him to return to Kapilvastu and tell his family members about his quest. Siddhartha took his sword and cut his hair and threw them in the air. Saka and other gods appeared in the sky and took them to heaven. Siddhartha continued with his journey. The crown prince was now a wandering ascetic on his quest for the ultimate truth of life. He was now living on alms given by laity and had no permanent abode. He rested under a tree by the day and spent his night inside some secluded cave. Barefooted, he kept on walking south. He crossed the river Ganges and reached the city of Rajgriha. As he was walking through the streets, the people of Rajgriha were awestruck by his royal appearance and calm gait. Soon the news reached Bimbisar, the king of Rajgriha, that a monk who looks no less than gods is seeking alms in his city. Bimbisar had a look of Siddhartha from the terrace of his palace. He was struck by his looks and royal appearance. He sent his courtier to fill his alms bowl and another courtier to find where the monk was going. The courtier brought the news that the monk was staying at the Pandava hills. Bimbisar went to the Pandava hills to meet the young ascetic the next morning. After bowing to the young monk, Bimbisar requested him to stay at Rajgriha. He offered him land, a palace, and all that would make his life comfortable. The young monk answered that he was Siddhartha, the crown prince of Kapilvastu, the kingdom of Sakyas. He had renounced the worldly life to find an answer to the pains of humankind and was in search of the ultimate truth of life. He wanted to win over desires and not to indulge in them. Bimbisar requested that once Siddhartha reached his goal, he should teach him the path of unsurpassed knowledge and wisdom. Siddhartha promised to teach the path once he attains the ultimate truth of life, and he left for the Vulture Peak, another hill in the vicinity of Rajgriha. The Vulture Peak was full of ascetics. He lived there with the ascetics and practiced their mortifications and meditations. Soon he surpassed them all in mortifications and was called the Great Ascetic or Mahashramana. It was not long that he learned that the ultimate goal of ascetics of Vulture Peak was to attain heaven and not enlightenment and finding the ultimate truth of life. He left them in disgust. The scriptures tell that after his brief stay with the ascetics of Vulture Peak, he went to Vaishali to the renowned ascetic and teacher of his time, Alara Kalama. Alara Kalama led a strict monastic life with his 300 disciples. Siddhartha soon learned and mastered his doctrine of state of nothingness. Alara Kalama offered him the leadership of his disciples as equal to him. Siddhartha turned down his offer as he had realized that the doctrine of Alara Kalama was not the answer to his quest for the ultimate truth of life. The doctrine did not lead to the cessation of pain or enlightenment and Nibbana. He left Alara Kalama and went to another sage, Udaka Ramputta. Ramputta was a famous ascetic at the time of Buddha and lived near Rajgriha with his 700 disciples. Siddhartha soon learned and mastered the doctrine of Ramputta, which was called neither perception nor non-perception. Udaka Ramputta proposed to make him the leader of his entire school of disciples, including himself. But Siddhartha found his doctrine also to be unsatisfactory and abandoned him for the higher goal of finding the ultimate truth of life. Siddhartha has realized that there was no teacher capable enough under whom he could attain the supreme enlightenment and Nibbana. He had realized that the highest truth was to be found within himself, and seeking external help was futile. He came to the army township of Uruvela and settled at the banks of the river Niranjana. Standing on the bank of river Niranjana, he was lost in deep contemplation about the spot and its bliss. He thought that the location was ideal for an ascetic to practice extreme self-mortification to attain the ultimate enlightenment. The clear waters of the river Niranjana flowed through a rich fertile land with several small hamlets scattered around in the landscape. Siddhartha thought that the place was very pleasant and the right spot for meditation and penance for attaining ultimate enlightenment. He decided to dwell at that spot, which was a charming forest grove. There were villages and townships nearby where he could obtain food during his alms round. In ancient India, great importance was attributed to sacrifices, penances, rites, and ceremonies. It was believed that the suffering of life could be won over only by the sufferings of the body. There was no scope of deliverance without leading a life of asceticism, sacrifices, and penances. Siddhartha made extreme endeavors towards this end for the next 6 years. He moved up the Dungeshwari hills and practiced extreme forms of self-mortifications to attain ultimate enlightenment. His soft and shining royal body was reduced to a skeleton and his skin turned black. He spent the entire period living alone and naked in the forests of Dungeshwari hills, sleeping on beds of thorns. He never took shelter from rain, heat, and cold, and spent the hot summer days and cold winter nights meditating on the open grounds. He hardly ate, and he denied every kind of nourishment to his body. At most, he used to eat only one fruit or a few grains of rice or a few seeds. He started torturing his body to extremes. His body got covered in dirt and filth, and he appeared loathsome. He stopped cutting his hair or beard for months. Impressed by the renunciation of Siddhartha and his extreme self-mortifications, the 5 Brahmins whom he had met in Rajgriha came to him and requested him to accept them as his disciple. Siddhartha accepted all these 5 Brahmins as his disciple. Later, Buddha shared the details of his self-mortifications during his struggles for attaining ultimate enlightenment with his chief disciple Sariputta. Buddha told Sariputta that because he practiced these extreme forms of mortifications, his limbs became like knotted joints of the wasted creepers. His backbone appeared like a string of balls, and his ribs like exposed rafters. His eyes sunk deep in the socket, and his sparkling pupils appeared like water at the end of a deep well. His scalp shrunk like a dried up bitter gourd left in the heat of the sun. When he touched the skin of his belly, he got hold of the skin of his back, and when he tried to touch the skin of his back, he got hold of the skin of his belly. His rotting hairs used to fall from his body whenever he stroked his legs with his hands. He used to negate breathing and used to hold his breath for long periods, which produced extreme sweating, loud roaring inside his head, extreme pain in his stomach, and severe headaches. Due to these extreme forms of self-mortification, one day he collapsed and lost consciousness. However, Siddhartha regained his consciousness after some time, but by that time, he had already realized that there was no higher realization in self-mortification. He realized that the starvation to death did not lead to the attainment of the state of supreme consciousness or ultimate enlightenment, nor the extreme self-mortification led to true knowledge. He had realized that supreme liberation cannot be attained with a weak and starving body. He decided that he will find his path of ultimate enlightenment on his own and will not depend upon the teachings of other ascetics. He decided to regain his strength and take nourishment. Siddhartha accepted the offering of rice and milk from Sujata. Sujata was the daughter of a householder named Senani from Uruvela. She had made a wish to a peepal tree, and on the fulfillment of the wish, she prepared the meal and took it in a bowl to the tree. She found Siddhartha sitting beneath the tree and thought that he was the god of the tree who had come down. She offered the meal to him, and Siddhartha accepted the meal. He started to go back to the village and beg for food, and gradually he began to regain the former strength and beauty of his tender body. His 5 disciples thought that Siddhartha has left the higher path and instead selected the easier path of comfort and luxury, and soon they abandoned him in disgust. Siddhartha used to take his food before noon and meditated for the rest of the time. He meditated, practiced mindfulness, and developed great powers of concentration. On the full moon day of Vaishakh month, he thought of sitting under a peepal tree. With determination to attain supreme enlightenment and not to leave his seat before attaining enlightenment, he started moving towards the tree. On the side of the road, he saw a reaper named Swastika who was cutting the kusa grass. He requested Swastika to give him some grass. The reaper folded his hands and gave him 8 handfuls of the tender green grass. He placed the grass on the ground below the tree and they covered it like a thick carpet. Siddhartha sat down, cross-legged, facing east, his head and shoulders upright. He started his meditation to attain the ultimate enlightenment. As he sat down and meditated, evil thoughts and passions started to crowd his mind. Siddhartha was firm that he will not let these evil forces overpower him. Eventually, all the evil thoughts and passions disappeared due to his determination and firmness. He spent that night in deep meditation and passed through higher and higher stages of consciousness until he attained the ultimate enlightenment. In the first watch of the night, he gained knowledge of all his previous births. In the second watch of the night, he learned the present state of all beings. He perceived beings disappearing from one state of existence and reappearing in another. In the third watch of night, he understood the chain of cause and effect. He attained the knowledge of the sources of the suffering of the world and realized the path which leads to the extinction of this suffering and sorrow. He discovered the 4 noble truths and the noble eightfold path. Siddhartha attained the supreme enlightenment and became Buddha, the awakened one. After attaining enlightenment, Buddha spent the next 7 weeks near the Bodhi tree. experiencing the bliss of emancipation. During the first week, Buddha meditated on the diamond throne under the Bodhi tree. He reflected on the doctrine of dependent arising. During the second week, Buddha stood at some distance and gazed at the Bodhi tree with unblinking and motionless eyes. Later, a shrine was erected at that site to mark that event called Animisi Lochana Chaitya. He spent the third week in walking meditation or Sankama. The fourth week was spent in the Ratnaghar or chamber of precious stones, contemplating the different aspects of the Abhidhamma. The fifth week of Buddha was spent enjoying the bliss of emancipation, meditating under the Ajapala Nigrodha tree in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree. During the sixth week, suddenly there was heavy rain. The dark cloud persisted for many days with heavy rain and cold winds. Mukalinda, the serpent king, came out of his abode and spread his large hood over the head of Buddha to protect him from rain and wind. Buddha passed the seventh week peacefully under the Rajyatna tree. At the end of the seventh week, two merchants named Tapassu and Bhallika from the ancient city of Ukala in Myanmar offered him rice, milk and honey. This was the first food that Buddha had after his enlightenment. They became the first two lay disciples of Buddha and they took refuge in two Ratna. They took refuge in Buddha and Dhamma only, as the Sangha was not yet established. After attaining enlightenment at Uruvela, Buddha was undecided about teaching Dhamma to others, but on inspiration from Brahma, he set out to teach the 5 ascetics who have served him for 6 years but left him after he abandoned the path of self-mortification. Buddha reached the deer park on the full moon night of Asara month. And that very night, he gave his first sermon, called Dhammachakravatan Sutta. The second sermon given by Buddha is called Anat Lakhana Sutta. In Sarnath, Buddha also preached one of the richest men of his time, named Yash, and his 54 followers, and they all became Arhants. Later, Buddha asked all these 60 Arhants to go in different directions, with no two Arhants going on the same road, thus establishing the order of the monks or Sangha. After the Sangha has left from Sarnath, Buddha returned to Uruvela. He converted the Kassapa brothers and their 1000 matted disciples. All of them attained Arhantship. He came to Rajgrih with his disciples, the 1000 Arhants. They were warmly welcomed by Bimbisar, the king of Magad. He donated Veluvana, or the bamboo grove, to Buddha when he returned from Sarnath to Rajgrih. This was the first donation of a park to Buddha. Buddha was very fond of Veluvana, where he used to live during his stays in Rajgrih. The place had special significance to him, and he enjoyed taking bath in the Karanda pond at Veluvana. He spent several months in Rajgrih, meditating and preaching at different places. Rajgrih also witnessed several attempts on the life of Buddha. Devadatta, his stepbrother, tried to kill him over the leadership of the Sangha. He sent archers to kill Buddha, but all of them were instead converted by Buddha. He tried again to kill Buddha by hurling a large stone at him from the peak of the hill while he was walking up the Vulture peak. The stone missed him, but a splinter wounded Buddha's leg. Jivika, the royal physician, attended and healed Buddha's leg. Finally, Devadatta got the elephant Nalagiri intoxicated with liquor and sent him charging towards Buddha. Buddha subdued the charging elephant with his loving kindness, which is counted as one of the major miracles of Buddha. Buddha continued preaching. King Suddhodana, his father, received the news that Buddha was residing in Rajgriha. He sent a courtier, Kaludai, who was a childhood friend of Buddha, to invite him to Kapilvastu to meet his aged father. Buddha agreed and started his journey towards Kapilvastu, preaching Dhamma throughout the way. He reached Kapilvastu in 2 months. Arrangements were made for his stay at Nigrodharma, the banyan grove, which King Suddhodana offered to him when he reached the city with his disciples. Prajapati Gautami, his second mother, offered him the robe. He visited the palace of his father, and all but Yashodhara, his wife, came to pay their respect. She felt that if there was any virtue in her, Buddha will definitely come to her, and then she will pay her respect. After having the meal, Buddha entered the chamber of Yashodhara. Yashodhara placed her head on his feet and paid her respect. When Buddha was leaving the palace, his son Rahul followed him. He asked him to give him his inheritance. He followed Buddha, and Buddha did not stop him. After they reached the Nigrodharma, Buddha asked his chief disciple Sariputta to ordain little Rahul into Sangha. Prince Rahul was only 7 years old at that time. In Rajgriha, a rich merchant named Anath Pindika met Buddha. He invited Buddha to visit his hometown Sravasti. Anath Pindika's aim was to build a vihara for Buddha, and he surveyed different places but found a park outside of the city to be the most suitable site. He finally selected the park at the southern edge of the city. The park belonged to Prince Jeta, the son of King Pasendi. Jeta did not want to hand over the park and thus asked for an exorbitant price. He asked Anath Pindika to cover the entire park with gold coins, which to his surprise, Anath Pindika did. Only the trees remained uncovered, which Jeta donated to the vihara. At the time of Buddha, this monastery was called Jeta Anath Pindika Arama. Buddha spent most of his monastic life in Sravasti, and naturally, it was the place where he gave most speeches and held numerous sermons that were recorded in the scriptures. Jetavana was the place where Buddha spent most of his rainy retreats, spending 19 rainy retreats out of a total of 45. The Anand Bodhi tree was planted near the entrance of Jetavana at the request of Anath Pindika. Anath Pindika requested for a symbol to be worshipped when Buddha used to be away from Sravasti after the rainy retreats. Once Buddha came to know about the merchant's request, he suggested using the sapling from the Bodhi tree and designated it as a symbol of worship. Buddha added to the sanctity of the Bodhi tree by meditating under the tree for one night at the request of Ananda. Buddha performed the twin miracle in Orajhar during the 7th rainy retreat at Sravasti. He performed these miracles to confound the Tirthika heretics. When he performed the twin miracles, he emanated flames from the upper part of his body and water from the lower part, and alternatively from the left and right sides of his body. Buddha also created multiple images of himself, which became a popular theme of Buddhist arts. After these miracles, he ascended to heaven to deliver Abhidhamma discourse to his mother and the congregation of Devas in the heaven. After spending 3 months of rainy retreat in heaven, he informed Saka, the king of gods, about his intention of returning to earth. Saka created 3 ladders, one made out of gold, another of silver, and the third made out of precious stones. Buddha descended upon the third ladder, the Devas and Brahmas accompanying him on either side, with the Devas taking the gold ladder and Brahma the silver ladder. The miracle was witnessed by a large congregation of people at the gate of Sankeshya. Buddha continued teaching Abhidhamma in the Gangetic plains of India until the age of 80 years. When Buddha was 80 years old, he announced at the Kapala shrine in Vaishali that his time was nearing the end and it was time for his parinirvana. He prepared for his final journey to Kushinagar along with his disciples. In deep sorrow, the Lichavis of Vaishali kept following him towards Kushinagar, and they were not willing to return. Eventually, to persuade them to return, Buddha created an illusion of a river which finally compelled them to return home. He then gave them his alms bowl as a memorial and asked them to return to their respective homes. Later, the Lichavis built a mud stupa in memory of that event. He continued his last journey in stages. In Pava, he ate his last meal, offered by the smith Kunda. Kunda prepared a special delicacy called Sukar Madhava. As directed by Buddha, he served the meal to Buddha only and buried the rest in the ground. He told Kunda that this meal will be remembered as one of the two most important meals of Buddha. The first being the meal offered by Sujata before his enlightenment. After the meal, Buddha suffered from dysentery with intense pain in his stomach, but he continued with his last journey, though he was severely ill and extremely weak. He reached the final resting place at the Sal Grove of the Mallas by the bank of the river Hiranyavati in Kushinagar. The sal trees were under full bloom without the season. He instructed Ananda, his attendant, to spread the upper robe between the two sal trees. Here he gave his last sermon. He preached that decay is inherent in every existing thing. Everyone should work on their salvation with diligence. He instructed his followers to seek no external refuge and to work on their salvation by walking on the path of Dhamma. Buddha was lying on his right side between two sal trees with his head facing north when he was taking his last breath. Finally, one of his disciples, Anuruddha, declared that Buddha has left the mortal world and attained the parinibbana. Buddha passed into Mahaparinibbana on the full moon day of Vaishak month in 543 BC. The ruler of Kushinagar arranged for the cremation, and the last rites were carried out as per the honor of a Chakravarti king. As per the directions given by Ananda, the body of Buddha was wrapped in new cloth, then in cotton wool, and again in new cloth. On the seventh day after Buddha's death, his body was carried for the cremation to the place where the Malla kings used to be crowned. After his cremation, the relics were divided into 8 equal parts and given to 8 different clans who were in attendance to take their share. These relics were kept in 8 relic stupas in different parts of the country. Buddha taught the Dhamma out of love and compassion for all human beings, and his Dhamma is still providing the path to humankind.